Hello, everyone, and very much welcome and good afternoon. Thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon in the ongoing webinar series organized by the Institute of Corporate Directors. Firstly, thank you so much to ICDM for helping to facilitate this, actually this entire week and the week ahead. Just because we are stuck at home, though, it does not mean we can't make it fulfilling. So thank you, all of you, who have made the time to join us this week. I have found it very enlightening for sure. Before we go on, I know you've heard this before, but I'll make it quick. On the Zoom tab, there's one for Q&A and there's one for chat. If you have any questions, that's where you should drop, for Eric in particular, you should actually drop them in the Q&A tab. We'll answer them at the end. But if you're having any technical difficulties or you want to give feedback or anything, please feel free to drop us a chat. Today, we warmly welcome Eric Vermeulen, ICDM faculty and innovative thinker all the way from the Netherlands. His topic today is Leadership Today, Authentic, Open, and Transparent. Now, I think a lot of us are either hoping, or at least I am, or wishing that when this is all over, we will go back to some semblance of what actually is normal. But really, there will be a new normal, and we will all have to live with it and adapt to it in particular. Now, if this crisis has taught us anything, is that leaders with clear agendas and less hyperbole are actually sorely needed. But really, what kind of leader do we need at this point in time that can lead us out of it, and not only just out of it, but make sure that we go on to the next level? I'll leave it to Eric to answer that. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And good afternoon, everybody. I have to get used to the time because here it's pretty early morning. So it's an interesting question that was asked. What kind of leader do we need in these very difficult times? So let me share my presentation. So here we go, and basically the first slide already gives the answer. We need a Papa Smurf as a leader. We need a very wise, very experienced person, preferably with gray or white hair, as you can see here with Papa Smurf. You know, Papa Smurf was my hero when I was younger. Whenever there were difficulties or we had difficult times, of course, I was watching the Smurfs and Papa Smurf was giving all the answers. He was basically the coordinator, he was the distractor, he was the communicator of the group, and whatever happened, he would find a way out. And the question is, do we need these type of Papa Smurfs? Well, in these very difficult times, many people understand that leadership is extremely important. So whenever you do a Google search, you will find a lot of information. You will find websites that give you a lot of answers. You will, for instance, I go back. Now I go a bit too fast. No, it doesn't matter. So you will find a lot of websites, for instance, McKinsey, that tell you what kind of leader is actually necessary in these times. So I did a Google search myself yesterday, and it is amazing how many answers you will find. And then the question is, do we actually need to think about leadership? I think that's the first question that we should ask ourselves. And the answer is obviously yes. So when you look at this guy, Paul Polman, he was the former Unilever CEO here in the Netherlands. And we all adored him because he was the CEO that not only looked at the profits, but also looked at sustainability. And he has this fantastic quote. He says, like millions of workers and businesses are at risk as the global economy hits the pause button. And I think that's right, because of course we have the crisis, we have the health crisis, which is terrible, but then we also have like a lot of businesses that are affected. So for instance, my wife, she owns the restaurant, and yeah, we had to close the restaurants. So basically, the global economy has hit the pause button. And the question is, what should we do? What kind of leadership do we need to, one, get out of this crisis? And as was mentioned at the introduction, to go back to maybe normal or a new normal or a next new normal. So yes, we have to think about leadership. And this is not only affecting certain industries, it's affecting many industries. As you can see on this slide, It's affecting oil and gas. It's affecting hotels. It's affecting air transport. These are the obvious ones. And you see that the change in market capitalization of these companies, you can see that on the far right side, is tremendous. They lost like more than 50% of their value. But also industries that are doing well, like energy, retail, online retail, even though they are doing well, they also lost value. And many people think, for instance, that Netflix, the value of Netflix went up. I invest in Netflix. But no, the value didn't really go up at all. So every industry is affected by this crisis. And it's everywhere. It's in Africa, it's in Canada, it's in China, it's in Asia, it's in Japan, it's here in Europe. Everywhere we see a significant impact on businesses. And this means, according to Professor De Moderen from the NYU, that we have to rethink everything, basically. He says, and you see some quotes at the bottom of this slide. Historical data may be recent, but it's already dated. Or this year will deliver bad news no matter what. Or survival has become a central question to many businesses these days. Or the post-virus economy will be different from the pre-crisis version. So we have to do so many things as companies these days. And then obviously leadership is one of the first things we are thinking about. Now, that we are going through difficult times everywhere was also made clear in the ICDM report that came out, I think, last week. So I put some of the data on a slide. And you can see here, they were asking about the Malaysian economy, and 38% of the respondents think that there will be depression or even a recession. Or no, I should put it the other way around, of course. It's a recession, and some even think it's a depression. Not that many people think that nothing will happen. So we see huge impact here. And this means that we are basically, and that makes it extremely difficult for me. So I'm working from home myself, but I often feel during the day that we are on a roller coaster. You look at the news and then you read some good news. You see that things go better. Less people go to the IC. But then 1 hour later, you see that, oh God, there's something really terrible happened again. So it's a roller coaster ride every day, emotionally, but also for businesses, economically, socially. And yeah, we have to get out of this. So I started this presentation with an example of a leader, and that was Papa Smurf. But Papa Smurf, as I remember him, he was a guy that he took his time to make decisions. And maybe in this time and age, we need a different leader. We need a more determined leader. And I found one example online. Maybe we need somebody like Captain Marvel, somebody who is fierce, who will show us the way immediately, who can act instantly and get us out of this crisis. So maybe she is the example of leadership that we need. And then we get to one slide that I showed last year when I was in Kuala Lumpur talking about leadership. Maybe when we talk about leaders these days, maybe we need people that are kind of crazy, that are the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes. This is an old ad from Apple where they wanted to say, well, what it matters is that you have to think different. And maybe in this time and age, we have to think different. Maybe that's what leaders need to do. And then you get to many, many leadership books out there that will show you what leadership is about, whether you are in a crisis or whether you are just in normal times. And that's shown here. So what we need is a leader who doesn't just show us in guidelines or books what we have to do. That's like a boss. No, maybe we need a leader who shows us what we have to do. And you see that on the right-hand side on this slide. Maybe that's what we really need. And I could stop there and maybe say, okay, so we need leaders that lead by example, that take you and take the workers by the hand and show us where to go in these difficult times. And maybe that's just it. Very simple. And when I look at the report again that was issued by the ICDM last week, that could be the answer. Maybe the answer is yes, you know, companies are going through difficult times. We have gone through difficult times before. These the difficult times we are seeing right now are extraordinary. But when I look at the report, it amazed me that most of the companies said, well, we have the necessary plans to go through these crises. And yes, they are implemented, or no, but we are ready to implement them. Some of them are in the process of developing them. And there are only a few that, according to this research and the questionnaire and the answers, are not really ready. And this is kind of surprising. So we could go and say, well, leaders should show the way. We should have strong leaders. We should have leaders with experience. And then everything will be fine again because we have the necessary plans in place. And I was very, 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 very surprised by the responses. As many of you will know, I'm both a university professor, but I also work at a company called Signify, which is Philips Lighting, and I worked there for more than 20 years. And I can tell you what I am experiencing now, I never ever experienced in 20 years. So we have to be a bit careful when we say, well, we as companies are ready, because I don't know whether we are ready. And that brings us to the real question. The first question is the company ready? Do we have all the plans in place? And then we need to understand what kind of leader do we need. Now, that we aren't ready was already mentioned in 2015 by Bill Gates. Bill Gates in 2015, he gave a TED talk where he said, well, we are not ready for the next epidemic. And maybe many of you have watched it. If you haven't, you should definitely go out there and watch this TED talk, because it's amazing. In 2015, what Bill Gates was saying is exactly what's happening right now, and we aren't ready. The issue in his talk is that he was talking about Ebola, and that makes it immediately like, oh, this is something that happens in certain countries in Africa. But it will never, ever affect us. That's the feeling that at least we have here in the Netherlands. But now it's happening to us, and it shows that we aren't really ready. Now, another example was 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I was talking to my boss at Signify, and we were just talking about the crisis and all the things that have to be done. And what he said, Eric, listen, what we are experiencing right now, it's amazing. We never ever experienced this before. And the problem is we don't have any best practices. We don't have any procedures that deal with this. So we have to start from scratch. We have to go back to the drawing board basically every day. And we see this in society. We see it within business. There are simply no checklists that we can use to get out of this crisis. So when we talk about leadership, and when we talk about businesses getting out of the crisis, I think we should ask ourselves one question. And the question is a question that I tried to answer a couple of weeks ago in one of my blogs. And the question is, will the world ever be the same after COVID-19? And I've been thinking about this a lot. And I can tell you one thing, if you look at education, it will change significantly. If you look at banking, it will change. If you look at travel, it will change. And I've been thinking about this question a lot. And I think this is the question that every leader, particularly in businesses, is asking him or herself every day. Will the world ever be the same after COVID-19? Now, when you go online, that's what I normally do, you will find a lot of answers to this question. One answer was given literally last Friday, April 3rd, by Scott Galloway. Scott Galloway is a business, marketing, and maybe kind of finance professor at NYU in the United States. A very successful entrepreneur, so he knows what he's talking about. And he says, well, the answer is basically things are not going to change, according to him. However, they will accelerate. So he says, well, the world was already changing. We had digital transformation. We went already through, some new things, and that's going to accelerate significantly. So according to him, the crisis will not change many things, but it will accelerate. And then the question is, are businesses ready for the acceleration? And what kind of leaders do we need to help businesses accelerate? And that's a good question. Now, I have a kind of different view in my blog, and I've been thinking about this a lot. And what I see, particularly in business, is that the status quo that we have is changing. And I compare this to something I read about when I was doing my PhD thesis. This was in 2001. In 2001, I read an article by Professor Gilson, and he's from Columbia University and Stanford University. And he made this point that whenever you want to change something, it's extremely difficult to change because everybody tries to protect the status quo. And even if you want to change, it's very difficult to change the status quo. And he compared what you see on this slide, a highway. And you see that highway on the left-hand side. There is a huge highway in San Francisco, at least there was a huge highway in San Francisco that separated the waterfront from downtown. And many people wanted to get rid of this highway because it was not nice, it didn't look nice, and it was blocking the views, etc. Now, it was extremely difficult to get rid of this highway because there were some interest groups, and they were the minority who didn't want to get rid of the highway because they said this highway was extremely important to them to connect certain parts of San Francisco. So the majority wanted to get rid of the highway, but the minority said, no way, we need this highway. Then they tried it several times. It never happened. The status quo was protected and the status quo was keeping the highway in place. Then there was an earthquake, the Loma Prieta earthquake in '89. And it destroyed the highway partly. They could have rebuilt it. But then the status quo changed because of this crisis. Then the majority who wanted to get rid of the highway, of course, they said, well, it's demolished, let's get rid of it. The people, the minority that wanted to have it rebuilt, they lost because the status quo changed. And this is exactly what's happening today in this world. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Also, when I look at my business, it's changing. And what we are going to see is a next normal. And nobody really knows what this next normal will look like. But I can tell you that if businesses are not going to think about the next normal and actually design the next normal, because the winners of this world, they are going to design the next normal, not think about it. It's not that we are on a trajectory and that we can actually predict what the next normal will be. We can't. So the companies that are going to survive this crisis will be able to come up with the next normal. And that means that we don't need a leader that has a lot of past experience, or we don't need a leader that has a guidebook and shows us how to do it, takes us by the hand and then leads us through the crisis to the new normal. No, we need to have leaders that can help the organization design the best normal. So when this is the case, I was extremely happy to go back to the ICDM report and read that many respondents, particularly when they looked at the board of directors, said that the board of directors needed a different skill set to help the companies and management go through this crisis and basically define the next normal. And what the report said was actually true. So if you haven't downloaded the report, please do, because it's extremely important and you can learn a lot. The report is basically mentioning 5 skills that board of directors or members of the board of directors need to have. 1, crisis management. True. The other one, risk and compliance. True. But then the 3 that I highlighted in red are leadership skills, communication, and technology and innovation. And actually these 3 are connected. And these 3 are the, I think, most important elements, skills that leaders need to have these days. And the report goes further then. The report tells you what leaders need to do in order to get through the crisis. And here you see 9 of them. Reprioritize your goals, review your human resource policies, revisit your crisis and continuity plans, evaluate your supply chain, identify potential points of failure, communicate effectively, not just externally, but internally as well. Be agile in adapting those to the changes. Don't lose sight of other potential risks, and start paving the path to recovery. And these things are all true, but they are kind of reactive. They are not really proactive. And if you have to find and design the next normal as a company or as an organization, I don't know whether this is sufficient. More is needed. So I'm going to give you an example. As I mentioned, there's a lot of information on leadership these days. And many leaders are basically take us by the hand and use digital means to explain to us what is needed. And what you see more and more are videos, video messages, blog text done by leaders. And here you find one. This is the CEO of the Marriott. And I think you can all imagine that the Marriott is going through extremely difficult times. There's hardly anybody in the hotels anymore. And yes, they can wait now for the crisis to disappear, but that will not mean that immediately the hotels will be full. So he's going in his video, and again, if you haven't watched it, please do. He's giving an excellent video. And in this video, he's delivering the bad news. He's doing it face to face, and he's immediately giving the bad news up front. Then he shows a shared sacrifice. What he says is, well, I'm going to give up some of my salary in order not to dismiss employees, because we have to go through this crisis together. He shows genuine emotion, and he always, that's what you do when you give a message to the crowd. I was an officer at the Air Force once, and that's the first thing they teach you. When you are talking to the troops, you always end on a hopeful note. So you don't end negative, but positive. And that's what he does. So he gives, if you want to know how to do a video as a leader, this is a fantastic example. Great. And it shows honesty, it shows transparency. But then the question remains, is this what we need in order to define and design the next normal? Now, if you don't want to do a video and you want to do a blog text, just to write something for the employees internally, but also for the people outside the company, this is a fantastic example, written and published by on April 1st. A message by the CEO of Zoom, Eric Yuan. And what he had a problem. So this company is doing really well. It's because of him now that we are having this webinar. But there were some security issues and some privacy issues. Some governments were looking into it. So he apologized in this letter. So you can, if you want to have an example of how to write a message as a leader, this is an extremely good example. Again, it's open, it shows the problem, it ends on a hopeful note. It's personal, and that's what you need. Now, these are all examples, and what I see more and more is that many companies are following these examples. If you ask me, too many. I have never ever seen so many video messages, and I've never ever read so many messages and personal messages from CEOs as I've read the last couple of weeks. Now I am in favor of this because I have given many trainings on communication and explaining what communication is about, and that communication should be honest, should be open, should be direct. But what I see now is a lot of copycats, a lot of people just coming up with all kind of messages. They pre-record the messages, put them online, and they all look the same. And then the question is, what about authenticity? Are these messages authentic? Yes or no? And I've been thinking about this a lot. So I think we can all agree now, I hope, that it's not only getting companies through the crisis and then we go back to business as usual. It's not that we go through the crisis and we can figure out the trajectory and we know now what the world will look like after the crisis. Not necessarily. In many cases, we have to define something new. And then just having a leader giving video messages might, to be honest, I see so many right now that I stopped watching them. So something else is necessary. And that something else is what I call digital leadership. So we have to have digital leadership within companies these days in order to get the companies through the crisis, but also to be able to define the next normal. So there are 5 components of digital leadership that you have to understand. And I will go through these 5 components now. First one, we basically discussed it already. It's brutal honesty. It's not that you need to be honest as a leader, it's brutal honesty. It's honest about what happened in the past at your company, understanding what the past was about, understanding the presence, understanding the problems that you have right now, but also understanding the future, and maybe be able to define the next normal. Because a return plan to business as it was before might not be sufficient. So the first thing that the leaders, the winning leaders have is brutal honesty about the past, present, and future. Number 1. Number 2, you need to create an open leadership environment, because leadership in this time and age, leadership today, as the title, that's the title of this webinar. It's not command and control. It's not the boss that is going to tell you where to go. It's not the say I. It's basically the say we. And in an open leadership environment, it's all about inclusivity. It's we. Basically, the best leaders make all the employees within a company a leader. They give freedom and responsibility to these employees to help them figure out what the next normal will be. Now, I can give you an example. Of course, I wanted to look for an example, and I found one, which is very current if you look at what's happening right now. And I just looked at political leaders because you will hear a lot about them. And I found probably one of the best reaction is of the Prime Minister of New Zealand. I think she's like 39 years old, JACINDA Ardern. And if you compare the way she communicates to the citizens of New Zealand, and you compare it to other leaders, for instance, in the UK, but also in the Netherlands, many of the messages are pre-recorded. As you can see here, this was just a Facebook video that was very honest, very open, very transparent. She was not dressed up. She was just wearing casual clothes. Now, it's not about that. But what she did was not command and control. Like Boris Johnson said, well, we all, in the UK, you all have to stay inside. If you go outside and you don't respect the rules, we will fine you. You will be able to get a fine. The same thing in the Netherlands. If you do not follow the rules and the guidelines, you will get fined. What she did was different. She was giving directions to the people and basically made all the citizens in society leaders. She was explaining, which is called meaning making. She explained the difficulties. She said, well, we don't have all the answers, but together we have to figure it out. And she shows empathy. I think she is the best example of creating an open leadership environment. And I recommend all managers and directors to look at the way she communicates, the way she gives directions, and the way she creates this environment that we all need to figure out the next normal. So that was number 2. Now, number 3 is basically related to that. When you give power to the employees and you ask them to help you and you give them the responsibility and the leadership that you need, you will be able to identify the ringers as managers. You will be able to find certain people that just stand up and come up with great ideas. So this contrasts to what you see on the right-hand side of this slide, the hierarchies that we have. When you go through the crisis, it's not necessarily that you go to top management first, they might have the answers, or you go to one level below. No, the answer might come from the ground. And when you create an open leadership environment and you see what other people are doing, certain people will just come up and rise, and they might be able to help you. So that's number 3. So in an open leadership environment, you try to identify the ringers, which then we go to number 4. And number 4 is about compensation and incentives. Well, if this is the culture that you create, an open leadership culture where we try to define the next normal, compensation and incentives are not based on seniority. They are based on the best idea wins culture. So somebody who just came into your company, just joined your company, he might be compensated better than a manager who's there already for 30 years, because this new person might find the answer, might help you to define the next normal. Now, these are like 4 things that are very obvious. Then we go to a 5th one, which is the last one and a bit less obvious, which is the working from home environment. Is it possible to create an open leadership environment when everybody is actually working from home? Because let's be honest, you want to have them in the office. When they are in the office, you create certain places for serendipity. You create an environment where people start to collaborate, where people are more creative. And lots of things are being written about working from home these days. Certain articles that you definitely should look into is on March 10 at the New York Times. There was this article written, sorry, but working from home is overrated. It went through all the advantages of working from home, being at home, having home cooked meals, not going to the cafeteria, not being stuck in traffic. I can tell you, Malaysia, sometimes you are stuck in traffic when you work from home. No stuck in traffic, clean air. But what he says is you will see that you will see less creativity because people are not able to meet. And that makes you think, because if you think back to what Steve Jobs said, Steve Jobs hated working from home and remote working. He says, no, everybody should come to the office. And what he did was, office design was extremely important to him. So he had this idea of open leadership already. And he said, well, office design is so damn important. So where are we going to put the bathrooms and the restrooms? Well, according to him, you have to put them in the center of the building. So everybody from all departments, they all have to go to the same place. You don't have too many office bathrooms, just one. So where people are going to meet randomly. And that's where innovation happens, according to him. At the bathroom or close to the bathroom, where people just meet, start talking, get new and fresh ideas when they go back to the workplace. So if this is the case, and I've been thinking about this, then all my components, which is like brutal honesty, open leadership, finding the ringers, having compensation schemes will all go down the drain if we are still stuck at home. And I think you can already feel it coming. That's exactly not the case. It's amazing what is happening these days. And I hate the crisis situation. It definitely makes me nervous. I mentioned it's like a roller coaster ride. But I've never, ever met so many of my colleagues as I've met right now working from home. We are on Zoom all the time. We contact each other instantly. And I think that's number 5, the 5th component, that really good leaders that want to help companies go through the crisis understand it's adapting to the more digital ways of working, unbounded by geographic constraints. Now, there's one example that you should definitely watch, which is Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk is a serial entrepreneur in the United States. He has several companies, and he hated working from home. And what you see here on the left-hand side is a video from 2017 where he says working from home is the worst thing that can happen because of the reasons I explained. People will not collaborate. People will not see each other. People will not be creative. But he changed his mind completely. Now he's stuck at home. And he explains this. I think when Steve Jobs was thinking about office design, we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have fast internet. We didn't have all the other tools to connect. Now Gary Vaynerchuk changed his mind because we are kind of stuck. But now he wants to have a mandatory working from home day because he can do so many more things. And you can connect to so many more people than before. And I was thinking about this, and this happened to me as well. I've never met my CEO so many times and seen him so many times before in the office that I've seen him now. Let me explain. When you are in the office, the CEO, top management, is always surrounded by the same people, the same advisors. Let's call them advisors. And it's very difficult to get an appointment with him. Right now, he is having, and you see this is Gary Vaynerchuk in the center on the left-hand side. You see my CEO, and he has these virtual coffee corners with you where you can just tap in. You can actually talk to him, and you can have one-on-ones, and you can explain your ideas to him, and he's open to listen to it. So this digital environment is actually one of the key components in this more open office space. Now, Gary Vaynerchuk that I mentioned, he has a daily show, which is called Tea with Gary V, where he's talking for 2 hours with people. How does it work? Well, let's assume that this is a company. An employee has a great idea, sends a WhatsApp or a message to the CEO. He's going through with a team through the best questions. Then you invite the people, and for 2 hours a day, you're going to discuss these ideas online, live, where all other employees can actually join. That's the open leadership that we need. Then you create serendipity that we have never experienced before, and that will help you define the next normal. So check this out because there's so much more to it than we all think. Which brings me to the concluding slide. Well, I think we all understand and we all agree that we go through very difficult times. And we as companies, it's like a car. We need shock absorbers because every day something happens and these are shocks. But we also need accelerators to whenever we find a nice opportunity, we have to go for it. And in order to create these shock absorbers and the accelerators, well, we need leaders. And we do not necessarily need the Captain Marvels. We do not necessarily need Papa Smurfs. We need actually leaders that have like 5 components and understand these 5 components very well. 1, I will mention them again. It's brutal honesty, because you have to be very honest. You have to be very honest. You hear my dog now, and my dog agrees with me. My dog agrees with me. So you have to be brutal honest. Open leadership, create an open leadership environment. You have to identify the ringers, and you can do that in open leadership. You have to adapt meritocracy, which basically means you have to pay people according to their ideas, and you have to create this environment, this digital environment that allows you to have this digital co-creation that you need to go through the future, and to get out of this crisis, find your new way. Now, the organizers of this event, they wanted me to talk for 40 minutes, and I exactly did 40 minutes. Thank you so much for your attention. I very much look forward to your questions and remarks. I'm going to stop sharing now, but first, if you want to contact me directly, you can do this by sending me an email or go on LinkedIn. He will find my details. Thank you so much for your attention. And again, back to the chairman, and I'm going to stop sharing if I can find. Yes, I stopped sharing now.
No worries about it, Eric. Thank you so much. 40 minutes exactly. Very, very good. Thanks a lot for a lot of the insights, and I can see that your dog agrees with you as well. We've got a whole bunch of questions, but before we launch into that, this whole work from home thing. The funny thing is we've broached it in our office, and we've got a bunch of really old school people who says that you need to be visible to people, and then another old bunch which are the younger saying no, we want to do remote. Is there anything sort of like a happy medium? Because the old school thinking, especially at my company, is you need to be present, you need to be seen by the boss, and only then the boss knows you're working. But the younger guys are like, look, we've given you, as long as we produce, why does it matter if we're there or not? Is there a happy medium?
No, I think they're both right. And I think that the digital, let's call it the digital environment, is allowing for visibility. And so I'm an old guy. I work at a company for already 20 years. And when I became an executive, I had a huge office with a huge table where we could have meetings, etc. And whenever I didn't want to I had two secretaries, literally two secretaries. And whenever I didn't want to have, you could not go to me. You had to pass the two secretaries first. And I, trained them very, very well. Old days, right? Old school.
Right.
But then that changed really fast. I think in 2 years, I lost my office. And now we don't have offices anymore. We have these open workspaces. And whenever I come in, we have to fight for the open workspace, literally. It's the first in, the best place out. Is gone. And what we do then, I reach here behind me, we need to have some privacy. So we're going to use these things, right? So we create our own, basically virtual office. Now, whenever I have a call, I have to go to a telephone booth with no oxygen. Many people recognize this. And you cannot stay there too long. Now, this is interesting. Is there a place for serendipity? Actually, there isn't in these new offices because we're all very busy. We're all in a hurry. Some of us might pretend. Some are really very busy. Getting a meeting with my boss is extremely difficult. When he is in the office, he's always in meetings and basically have to make an appointment. Now in the open workspace, and as I mentioned, I've never ever have so many private moments with my boss as working from home. Because I can see when he's available, I ping him and we are online and we can discuss in 5 minutes. So I see the point. Yes, and I think visibility is important. I think collaboration is extremely important. I think creativity is extremely important. But using the new online tools can actually help us. And what is surprising is that I have, in the last 4 weeks, I've done more innovative, creative, collaborative things within my company than in the 20 years before. Now, does this mean that we should get rid of the offices and all work from home in the future? No. But do we need all the big office buildings and all this fancy stuff? Probably also no. And I think we will find hybrids in the future for sure. And if I compare this to teaching, I can do the same thing. I had office hours and students came, but not too many because I had to make appointments. Now I have, because I stole this from Gary V, Tea with Gary V. My name is Eric V. I wanted to do tea with Eric V, but that sounded ridiculous. So I do now lunch with Eric V. So every Friday at 12, I just open Zoom and students come in. They show me where they are and it's incredible. The creativity and the innovation that we see right now is actually more than we had before. So the only thing I say is that when you are a real leader, take advantage of the digital environment. I don't say working from home is the answer. No, it's the digital connectivity that's the answer. And it's boundaries don't matter anymore. You don't have to travel. And I give you one more example, and then I go back to you. It's one thing that my boss said, you know, before the crisis, they traveled a lot. And the leadership team, they went to Shanghai. They looked at where things are manufactured, the plants, and they had they showed them around. He said, we are there with like 20 people being shown around. You could hardly hear the questions. There was hardly any discussion. If we, in the future, just do something with virtual reality, augmented reality, and we are just here in our desk and people show us around, probably we are better and more connected than we were in Shanghai. Now, we don't have to fly. We save time, we save cost, we help the environment. So there are many other things that play a role here. So that new normal will happen. Hopefully this answered your question. If not, we will do it offline later.
Definitely, but I definitely get that point. But actually, that leads into another question we have from one of our attendees, who's Norleila Baharudin, who's the MD for WPP. You know, she asked that putting the open comm style in the Asian culture, in having the leaders say, we do not have the answers, but together, you know, we'll work it out. How does this go down in a society, particularly where face is important for the leaders? Back to what I said earlier about being present, although whether you're working or not is another thing, but being present. How does this go down in a society where face is an issue?
It's an extremely good question. And yeah, you know, you guys only gave me 40 minutes. I needed to have another 20 to bring in culture. And actually, I'm working right now with people from all around the world: South Africa, United States, Europe, and Asia, to figure out leadership styles and cultures and how this works out in different cultures. Now, if face is so important and if the connectivity is so important, I think that leaders should realize that having these, and you don't have to do them every day, but having these virtual coffee hours, you will actually meet more people as really the top leaders, and you will probably understand more what's going on than what we currently see. Because let's be honest, it's a hierarchical system. And if you are like at a certain level, it's very difficult to get visible to the top. Now you will be able to get visible to the top by asking these questions, by doing these Zoom meetings, by doing Q&As. So I think in every culture, this is extremely important, particularly for businesses. And I understand Asian culture. I hear that a lot when you talk about leadership, but the 5 components will work very well in Asia as well. And I think the leaders will actually like it, because if leaders want to understand better what's going on in their organization and they really think that visibility is important, this is authentic visibility. And they should not be fooled by people go to the office very early, leaving very late, because these people might not be very productive, as we all know. And this is not only in Asia, but also in Europe. Lots of people go there very early and leave very late, and I have no clue what they have done the whole day. So yeah, I think this is something that we have to think about. It's part of the next normal, as you mentioned when we were starting this webinar.
So actually that leads into another question that Grace Yap has that we have here. We've talked about, yes, we should break it through, but how would you advise a mindset change happen? I mean, it's easy to say this should be the case, but how would you break it to the board or your management gently that the old ways just don't work?
No, I think the first thing is you have to be honest to yourself. I think that's where it starts, and really think what's happening now. So I compare to my company because that's the easiest. So we have a lighting company with light bulbs. As many of you might know, we are going through digital transformation, and you see the Internet of Things become more important. Now, if you then follow Scott Galloway, that digital transformation is being accelerated really quickly. Another thing is that you have to keep plants open. A lot of countries these days are closing manufacturing unless you are really needed in this time and age. So what we are now looking into is, what can lamps do to clean things? What can lamps do to help us go through the crisis? These are questions that you have today, and unfortunately,
Mm.
as I mentioned, there are no best practices. There are no procedures for this. There's not much time. But I think leadership teams should be very honest, should be very open, and try to get in touch as much as possible with what's happening within the organization. Now, many leaders understand that, and because working from home is there, they wanted to be visible. That's why many of them were coming up with videos, because they wanted to have that connectivity. In the old days, it was felt as not necessary because people would go to the office. Now it's felt like, oh God, we have to do something for the people at home. And I think this in itself, realizing that you have to do something for people that are all working remotely, is already the mindset change that you need within any organization. But now you should not stop there. That's what I say. But if you just, because now what I see is many leaders, particularly in my university, I think all deans have sent me video messages. It's like, and they're all the same. I think that's not what you should do. You then
Oh
go one
dear.
step further and try to see how can you use these videos to actually connect and get feedback from the other employees. So the crisis and the digital means that we are all using now, also in Asia, because you guys are with a webinar ahead of what's happening here in Europe. So just to give you an example, will flatten organizations as well. So the crisis, in combination with the digital world that we are living in, what actually happens is that we see that organizations get flatter as a result of that. And when we have this, you need this different leadership style, because then it's easier to implement. So the mindset shift, the mindset change is going to happen. If it's not going to happen, it will be extremely difficult for companies. So if companies are fighting what's happening right now, and I know certain companies actually in the Netherlands that don't allow the employees to work from home. They want them to go in. Now you see what kind of effect that has. So here we have the government asking you to stay home, work from home, social distancing. Then you have companies saying, no, you have to come. Do you think these employees are motivated? No, not at all. And they are the first ones that have to fire 5,000 people. So think again, and try to understand the digital world, and think acceleration.
Owen Lead actually asks, and this is interesting too, how visible should today's leaders be? We're talking about how everybody sends you a video now, right? Should
Yeah.
you lead from the front? Should you be in the public eye? Or do you lead from the back and you are the encouraging hand on the shoulder and you are the supporting? Which of this, how visible should they be? Or a mix of
I think
both
there's
again?
also, I see the point. I think this is an extremely good question, and I like this question a lot. And I can tell you why. What you see right now is a lot of people are copying, but people that don't want to do camera. Certain leaders are extremely good leaders, but they are not the people that are on camera, and they are doing it right now. It's not authentic, and I think this brings us to the point of authenticity. There's no one size fits all. And what I mentioned, the 5 components, like be honest, create open leadership environment, try to find the ringers, try to compensate the best ideas, and make use of digital means. It shows you that the person itself, you can have both. You can have sort of persons that are there, like Gary Vaynerchuk that I mentioned. He's there every day. He loves the camera. He loves to connect. You have certain leaders that don't like it. Well, there are different ways to do it. So you can actually be yourself and authentic in this age. You have to be authentic. You should not be forced as a person to do something else. It's not going to work. But these 5 components can work for any leadership style. If you look at, like, if you are there, you are supporting the people from the back, or you're on the front of the troops telling them what to do. Both are possible in this new world.
All right. This question was actually our first, by the way, from Albert Cho. I don't know how you take this, but would President Trump meet your criteria as an authentic leader, open and transparent? I know my views. What are yours, Eric?
Okay, I'm not going to talk about the political views of President of the United States. But over the last couple of weeks, so in the beginning, I think he made a couple of mistakes, but I'm not going to talk about that. But over the last couple of weeks, I think he's a bit more open. He was the one that took 2 ships that nobody wanted. He went to Florida to convince the governor there to have these ships, because we cannot have ghost ships. I don't know. I'm not going to say, well, President Trump is the example. No, not at all. If I want to take one political leader as an example, I think it's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and
Yes.
because she is, in all the crises that she had to deal with, I think she comes closest to what you want to see in leaders, without shouting. Certain leaders shout, certain leaders say things, and the next day they say something else. I think you should be extremely careful there. That's the only thing I can say. So I don't say, well, look at President Trump as an example. One thing I can say, but this has nothing to do with the crisis, is that what President Trump is doing better than the other candidates in the United States is the communication and understanding the people he's talking to. So his messages resonates more with the people that actually elect presidents in the United States. That's the only thing I can say.
Yeah, okay. I get, basically, he's preaching to the choir in a way. Moving on, Jasmine wants some clarification. She doesn't quite understand what ringers are. Could you just sort of go through it again,
Oh,
Eric?
yeah, sure. These are the people that actually matter in organization. These are the people that stand up and come up with great ideas that nobody has thought about. These are the innovators in organizations that might be hidden in hierarchical structures. And because in times of crisis, you want these people to step up, but these people might not be in positions to step up. These are the ringers. These are the people that actually matter now. We call them, it's an Americanized term, but let's call them the stars, the rising stars, the people that you need to innovate.
All right. Okay. Somebody, anonymous person asked, well, one of their attendees asking, we're at the brink or already stepping into the 4th industrial revolution, and the new leader for the new normal should be sort of like the chief of the future works. And the skill set should definitely be very, very different from what you actually have today. More than anything else, more than just a good business person, more than just somebody who can see the future, is communication as important a skill, you think, when you come to pick your CEO?
Yeah, no, the answer is yes. I think digital leadership was already important. I think that's accelerated. I think, yes, you need to have somebody who knows how to communicate, who understands the digital environment, who also understands that he might not be the smartest person in the room, because things are happening so fast. So as leaders, the leaders who think they are the smartest guys in the room, that might not be the person that you need right now to go through the crisis. And yes, the 4th industrial revolution, the digital revolution, I think it was already happening. The crisis is definitely accelerating it. If I just look, and now I take the university as an example. So we had online tools. We had the possibility to do online teaching, but nobody was doing it. We just went to the classroom like we always did for the last 20 years. Whether you were young or old, we all did the same thing. We had the digital tools. No, not really interesting. There were a few who did it, and it was terrible because they put a camera in the back of the lecture room, and there you could see a very tiny person in front writing something down that you could not really see online. If you look at what happened the last 4 weeks, it's amazing. We moved all our classes online. So now there was no way back. We have to give these students the teaching that they need. So we cannot say, well, we are going to wait. So what you see right now, discussions on online examination, online teaching. I bought myself a new camera, a microphone. I'm practicing this because I love be in front of the crowd. I want to see the people and I want to interact with them. Now I'm looking, and basically I gave my tripod with my camera a name. So I am basically doing my presentation in front to this one person who's not saying anything. But it's this practice that we all need. And I think universities show how things are accelerating. Now, when the crisis is over, are we going back to the classroom and forget about the online tools? The answer is no. Yes, we are going back to the classroom. But for sure, I keep my virtual office hours. I will do more recording of certain materials that people can actually watch when they need and when they want it. Younger generations want that as well. I see in certain questions, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. Well, the Gen Y and Gen Z want me to record more things. Now I get familiar with how to do it. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to have a mix of in-class, like old traditional classes. I will do more videos. I will do online. I will do virtual coffee hours to make, I think that's actually much better than what we had before.
I think we can all actually take a page from all the late night show hosts. I think you mentioned you had a tripod, a camera, and you gave it a name. A lot of the late night show hosts are finding that they have to do that too. So they're adapting to their new times. Haniza from Haniza AJ actually asks, all the examples you've given, Papa Smurf and all have given are mostly Westerners. Do you think their leadership style would be suitable in Asian culture? It's a variation, I think, on what a lot of the attendees have been asking today. Interesting concept. Will it fit home?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And let me explain. I'm from the Netherlands. So if I'm going to talk about Asia, it's not authentic, right? I have to give examples from my own life. So as I mentioned already, yes, I think all I said is very relevant in the Asian culture as well. And I'm working with people from Asia to transform this, and we were going to write about this to see how in certain cultures these 5 components that I mentioned will work out. And I think it's extremely important, but I also believe that you should be very careful by saying, well, this is all in the West and not Asia. I think the crisis that we have right now is extremely global. We would never, ever have imagined that this would happen here. I refer to Bill Gates when he was saying, well, the world isn't ready for the next epidemic. And we watched in 2015, he was talking about Ebola in Africa. And we all thought, well, yeah, sure, we will never have this kind of pandemic as we have right now. We would never be forced to work from home for more than 5 weeks. We would never have all our soccer games canceled. We would never have our restaurants closed. My wife is, I think, the restaurant of my wife is like 42 years old. They never, ever, ever had to close for so long. So this is happening everywhere. And I think what we see right now is some convergence as well in leadership styles. And I see Asian leaders doing the same thing. They also want to connect. Asian companies also have to define the next, let's say, the next normal, as you mentioned, when we started. And we didn't really discuss this before, so I was very happy about that. So here you are, right. You are from Asia, giving an Asian example, and I giving the same. We have the same issues. We need similar leadership styles.
We're actually almost at the end. We'll take about probably one more question. This is from Jeremy Nasruak, which is ICDM Fellow Member and Director for Kenanga Investment Bank. COVID-19 brings a lot of uncertainty in how the future will be, definitely for sure. And it can lead to a crisis, as happened in some very particular industries. Normally, when the crisis happens, you want a strong leader rather than a leader who refers to his subordinates all the time. Basically, a more iron hand, which can mean, because if you have somebody who sort of not kowtows, but asks everybody opinion, you could have a longer decision-making process. Comments?
Okay, yeah, no, this is, let's be honest. If I talk about the open, now let's be clear. When I talk about the open leadership model, it's not like we all sit there together and everybody starts shouting and screaming and we all have an idea. I think that's where the real leadership comes in, to find the ringers, to listen and to listen quickly, but also to understand that you might not have the answers yourself. So yes, you are very visible. So if you look at my CEO, He's very visible. He's a real leader. But he's not the
Mm.
iron hand that tells me this is what you have to do. It's not a command and control leader. He is leading all of us to the new next normal, but he is doing that by listening to all of us, but also by filtering the best ideas very, very quickly. So this can never happen if you don't have any leadership. And let's say you have a company with 5,000 employees. I think within Signify we have 23,000 worldwide. It's not that these 23,000 starts walking around and screaming. No, you have to have a leader that provide the context, the framework, the direction, all very important, but is also open to new ideas and is using digital means to get to these new ideas by communicating regularly, by being visible, him or herself, but also with a team, figuring out quickly what the best steps will be for the company, but also by giving certain responsibilities and let's say entrepreneurial spirit to the employees to get through the crisis. So not that you just sit back, tell me what you just do what I tell you to do. No, be more open and engage. You need to have leaders that are visible. So that means, so the strongest leaders to me right now, and this goes back to certain other questions, are the leaders that are visible, leaders that are willing to communicate, the leaders that are willing to enter into a dialogue, the leaders that are willing to listen, and the leaders that are willing to compensate the best idea best, and not just listening to seniority. These are the strongest leaders to me. So yes, you need a strong leader, but the definition of a strong leader is different than just a guy who's telling you, you have to do this, this, and this, and then we will go through the crisis, because probably not going to happen.
That is a fantastic way, I think, to end it. Thank you very much, Eric, for the very enlightening afternoon. With that, we come to the end of our webinar. We would like to hear from you for sure, ICDM. Please use the survey link in the chat box that you see, or scan the QR code to provide your feedback on topics of interest. There will be an online program series soon, so please watch this space. You can actually register your interest at development@icdm.com.my or visit icdm.com.my. ICDM will be hosting another webinar series starting next week, Monday at the same time. The speaker in the doc is Host UK, and his topic will be cybersecurity concerns amid a pandemic. Thank you so much again, Eric, for all your insights. Everybody, please stay safe, stay home, and have a good day.
Thank you.